Hi everyone. Good. Yeah, hi everyone. How are you doing?
Yeah.
I know it's a pretty like this quarter, and we're finding finals.
Yeah.
So it's okay if we're tired. And but I'll try to be not tired and give you like a like really I would say not in depth but like like introductory like talk on this whole subject, like recently that's quite popular. It's about neuro AI, like intersection of neuroscience and basically AI and like machine learning stuff. And I'll try to explain how this like I know like there are previous reading groups like there are like some I saw there's a like we have like last week or from the last week uh we talk about like mechanistic interpretability of transformers, and this I guess this will be in a similar fashion, but uh like the kind of thing I'm going to present is I guess more universal in the sense uh we're we're trying to derive some like bottom-up principle that is really kind of deciphering the black box of these deep neural networks we're now in current days. But like also and how these are really connected to neuroscience in the sense that they're in some sense quite similar. Yeah. So yeah. So do you have any questions before I start? Okay, so I'll start. Yes. Oh, and some first acknowledgement. This presentation is like a lot of the figures are adapted from this presentation from the ICML workshop given by my PI. So I really want to appreciate her and my mentor. Yeah. So let's first start with like the definition of what exactly is computational neuroscience. So it's like obviously it is a subject, right? So but like in general there are two like divisions in this subject, like depending on how you interpret it. The first division, what you could say is tool focused. What I mean is using computational tools like well Python or like any like software, I mean and hardware to investigate brain functions. And this could include like well some kind of brain machine interfaces. They use well like machine learning algorithms to study the brain functions in some sense. But this is in contrast with another approach which is more theory focused. And in this approach, the most interesting question is actually investigating the principles of computation in the neural systems. And this essentially means we're just really want to know how the brain is a kind of computer, or is it a computer? How does it compute actually? So we're more interested in this kind of like a nature question. So it's less engineering, but it could like yield a lot of like potential engineering fruit. Yeah, I will explain later. And so what is a computation first? So in mathematics, of course we can encounter like stuff like a function, and function can actually be a really like the basic type of computation. And if you encounter like functional programming before, like uh, and these are like some example of basic computation tasks. Basically, you just define a mathematical function, right? And you could say like adding something together is a computation we can perform. And but more generally, like we can define this as like a Turing machine, for example. And Turing machine often like involves like on the most surface level, I would say, involves some transformation of state. And you may say this kind of diagram before, but essentially, uh, a computation implies some underlying state below. And for the computer, like a Turing machine, that is just 0 and 1. But uh, so the natural question is, what is the analogy of this underlying state space in neural systems? So one potential answer to this is in neural system, the computation is the transformation of neural representations to achieve tasks. So then we have to wonder what is a neural representation, right? So I mean, do you have any question about this analogy here, like about computation in the sense of it's like a motion or a function that is you can like in linear algebra there are linear operators, and we have like ring operators here. That's essentially the same what integer state. And as you can see later, these transformations are really a lot of vectors. Yeah. And so we are interested, like, to define neural representation, we have to focus on different kind of levels, and there are like the most direct levels we can see is neural activities, which is we take it directly from our like brain cells and using some electrophysiology techniques, and these are in the actual physical sense, these are like kind of like spike trains. Essentially, each of these line means it reports the neurons over a course of time, and if the neuron fires like in analogy to machine learning, there'll be like an activation vision function that is triggered. There will be like a spike, and this kind of statistics is what we get. Like essentially, this is kind of like a huge list of vector, and there are also plasticity rules, which is governing how these basically how these neurons are interconnected, but we'll go to this later. But essentially, we may obtain representations in the sense we will obtain these physical states, and this is the kind of state in brain as we saw it right now on the bone surface level, and this can be connected to a lot of what like a task. You have to do a computation, right? Like for addition, you want to sum something together. That is the task you're interested in. And for brain, there are similar tasks because we're living today everything. But like I'm talking like moving my throat is my task right now. Wait, sorry. This is like yeah, it's not the information I have. Okay, never mind. So yeah, so I'm talking, so I'm performing this kind of task, right? And we're performing a lot of tasks every day, even in unconscious ways. And so these are modalities like sensory and motor and cognitive. And task, there can be a lot of different type of tasks, like most basically classification, of course, or I mean object recognition, which is really like why this is the basic task of machine learning in a lot of sense. Yeah, but there are also harder tasks that are in somewhat they're composed of each other. So yeah, I hope this give I think this will be very important to understand what is the neural representation. But yeah, and right now, as you can already see, this is really similar to kind of in machine learning. We have this like very large neural features from like deep networks, but I'll explain that later. Yeah, so what I'm going to present today is called manifold capacity theory, which is really just a theory devoted to understand the question I just talked about, like connecting conversation to representation. So we want to understand this kind of what is this operator in our brain is doing. So, and how is this actually embedded in the physical brain, or I mean states, you can say. So this will involve a series from machine learning and statistical physics. I will explain later. But right now, let's just go jumping into manifold capacity theory and define what it is. And yeah, so to build this theory, we just consider a very simple scenario. Like right now, like this is one of the tasks we have, right? Like we take a stimulus and we saw something. We saw this dog, and there's some. Of course, there are going to be some change in our neural representation, or I mean, not necessarily. That's what we're interested in, right? So we assume there are some neural population response according to the stimulus, and this is similar to what like a machine learning model when it's fed like an image fashion, there are going to be activations in each layer. So essentially we plot this vector like a long list of n-dimensional vector into this neural space, and this is the analogy to kind of the 0-1 space for computer. And the most important thing is to consider one extension like to about natural intelligence system, which is it is quite insensitive to variability, or it is robust to variability. So if we rotate this image along any way, we're still probably recognizing as a stock, right? And essentially we can do a lot of kind of variation to this thing, and the semantic concept is still remain. So when stimulus is varied, of course the response will be varied, and this in turn generates a manifold in the neural state space. And this is what we call the neural manifold. And this is not a kind of mathematical smooth manifold, but this is more like a point cloud. And you can also generate this manifold to be smooth in some sense by like changing this like linearly, like by a continuous variable. But this is like the most important concept, I guess, in this series, the object we are interested in. So our hypothesis is the geometry of these neural manifolds and their computational roles in certain tasks is very crucial for us to understand neural computation in this kind of different cognition process. Yeah. So do you have any question up to this point? I think this is yeah.
So like from the neural response to the manifold, like is that another network of like?
Oh, not really. This is one thing I will mention actually. So yeah, thanks for the question. So we're really just directly taking a raw input. Like this is like not like we're trying to decode this into something. That's like I would say how we're going to try to define a series that actually get information from this kind of random things. But this is right now just like a direct like projection. Like you have like 10 vectors here, 10 neurons responding, and you just have a 10-dimensional space. And that's how there's no dimensionality reduction. Yeah.
This is a very like deep learning tool. So this is kind of like our brain is kind of like an encoder, and you know that goes into like some sort of like in this case like neural state space.
Yeah, really.
And it's like we're trying to figure out if we can change.
Yeah, I'll show you how this actually happens in like what? Wait, sorry.
Oh, that's just how the HDMI opens thing is. You should actually just be able to plug it in directly.
I don't have HDMI.
Oh, do you not? Yes, you do. This is the new Mac.
Oh,
Yes. There you go.
Good. Okay. Yeah, what you said is really yeah, you'll see that later when we talk about applications, and you'll see like how monkeys and deep networks are really similar.
So you have like a really high dimensional neural population response base, right?
Yeah.
But then what do you expect like the dimensionality of the manifold to be within that?
Yeah, I'll go together that later. Very soon. So right now, this is just a raw thing. Yeah? We're not doing any data processing. And this is kind of like one of the power of this theory. Like we're not relying on any dimensionality reduction techniques or visualization techniques to study this. So yeah, let's move forward. And these are some this in previous works, and not by our group, but like in this like kind of review paper, like this is like building on why our intuition might work is because we have already seen a lot of geometric structures in neural populations, and like you can see there's a perceptual straightening in vision. Basically like the representation are kind of straight in some sense. But not going into detail, and there are also manifolds in motor systems, like some computation, dynamic sense, and there's some topology under navigation in neurons, and also some distance determinants. Yeah, but if you're interested, you can look at the paper. Yeah, but this is kind of building why we are having this hypothesis. So our problem statement is not. Yeah.
I would imagine these manifolds would look very, very different depending on like which neurons you choose and like
that is exactly right. But they are different, but we're essentially what we want to do is actually characterize these things. We want to know what properties we can get from this surface level chaos, and I'll get into that later. Yeah.
So are there like commonalities, like in the manifolds, like if you say you have 10 neurons in the prefrontal cortex versus you pick like one neuron in your prefrontal cortex and then you have occipital lobe or something like
Yeah.
the manifolds, are there like commonalities there, or are they like very different?
Yeah, there will be commonality, and also there will be difference, and that difference will be related to computation. Yeah. So yeah, so our problem statement here is really just how we use these neural manifolds to understand cognition, and our approach will be like building some metrics, and that's exactly what you asked. Building some actually like quantifiable metrics to characterize these neural manifolds, and we want to define this metric in some sense that they are directly linked to the task performance. So these are not like just data analysis like PCA metrics, like these are just only based on data. We're defining these metrics to be related, directly linked to computation, and I'll explain how we do this. Yeah. So our task here, like we focus in this particular scenario is like object recognition, but this can be extended in a lot of sense. But right now, the most natural way to think about like the variability stuff I talked about, like the simplest case is object recognition. Essentially, this is just like drawing a hyperplane between like different classes of things. But right now we're focusing on only on like class 1 or minus class. Basically means something or not something. But you can always draw this kind of hyperplanes, like in a lot of class, right? So I guess this is quite familiar with in our class. So yeah, so now we can frame this task in our theory as the separation of manifolds. So in the sense like we have two stimulus and we have two responses in the state space. But if we have variability in the stimuli, we will have manifolds in our state space. And what we want to do is to draw a hyperplane between these manifolds, such that we can separate them. And this manifold, if you learn in algebra, is essentially just a weight vector. And this kind of weight vector can be like assumed to exist in some like in machine learning neural networks, we have this like final layer, right? And this is kind of layer we do the separation task. Like if you train a neural network to do classification, you always connect it finally to like a 0, 1, I mean, if they're doing two class classification, but like this is the most basic scenario, and for doing like multiple class, that'll be really similar. But this is similar thing. We assume that it's happening in both brain and AI. Yeah.
Why are you assuming that the manifold are linearly separable?
We don't assume them. Yeah.
But if they're not linearly separable, you won't be able to draw hyperplanes with them.
Yeah, that's actually I'm going to extend this right now. That's actually what one thing this theory is about. It's about finding whether this is separable or not, and this kind of derive a lot of interesting matters.
Is that like, so you can, do you back this like theory up by saying if you can find like neurons which can like create a space where it is linear separable, then these neurons are the ones responsible for that detection? Was that kind of like the logic there? Or
yeah, that's the intuition is correct, but I will explain how this is actually formalized. Yeah, so now like our question is exactly is can we use neural geometry like the properties of these manifolds? They can be seemingly random, but how can we use the properties of this neural geometry to quantify how much we can separate these objects? And this is where we comes in like the perception theory, and this is a really old theory, I guess. First developed by Culver in 1965, and there are some physicists who also do this analysis, which I'm going to explain later, by Gardner, and they focus on this capacity thing. So the defined capacity is exactly what you asked about, like the critical number of points, classifiable points per dimension. Like, how you can intuitively understand this is if you have very separate stuff, like in this scenario, you can draw a lot of hyperplanes, right? And these hyperplanes all separate the two classes very successfully. But if you add more points and also not changing the entire ambient space, or you are increasing the size of these points, I mean, this is not related to size. Yeah. We're just increasing points. And the capacity, in a sense, is the critical point when you add more points per dimension of per like neurons. And at this point, you are no longer separable at all. So there's no way you can draw a relation between them. And that is exactly what you asked. So right. So there's a point, going to be a point like that makes this thing non-separable. And this critical point is what we're interested in and what we define as capacity. And the unit of this thing is number of classifiable points per dimension. And dimension is the dimension of the neural response I just mentioned. So this is a well-established theory, and there's precise formulas for how this capacity happens to be derived. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is an old theory, and what we are going to do is to generalize this theory to the manifold case. So essentially, we're not having points anymore, but we're having manifolds, and these manifolds can have geometric structures like dimension and radius. And about how we define this, we are not sure yet, right? But this is our intuition, and we're similarly, well, we hope to see a kind of similar thing called object manifold capacity that will similar arise here.
What, so like going from like more manifolds or more points, like in the manifold sense, in the point sense is just more images, but in the manifold sense, what does that mean? Like, is it like different kinds of cats, if you want to make an analogy to the image above?
Like there are different, yeah, maybe one example, like how to change the manifold dimension will be like you increase the variability dimension, right? You can change its shape, you can change its rotation, you can change its scale, like you're increasing variability, and our intuition is these are more different, right? And there are more variability, and so the manifold should be larger. But how we quantify this, it should be formalized. But also in another sense, since we're measuring this as a ratio between number of classes and per neuron, so you can also think about like as less neurons can store less stuff. And a very good analogy, I guess, I'll draw a picture that, like in a two-dimensional space, for example, like this two stuff cannot be separable, right? But in three-dimensional space, this can be separable in a sense because you have more like an extra dimension to manifold around.
Yeah, just like
Yeah, that's essentially the idea, and this can be generalized to high dimension.
Is that just mean finding more neurons that do that kind of like kernel method for like it pushes you out into that? Like
Yeah.
You just add more neurons.
Yeah, I mean, we're studying this like as a quantifier model, so we're not exactly like we're interested in all kinds of scenarios. Like how many neurons is not like an issue.
Would you want then like to find the smallest like number of neurons? I feel like it's like the most interpretable or something, or
yeah, I'll get to that because what you're mentioning is more like about how this, yeah, because when there are really few number of neurons, the kind of approximation we give cannot be really right since all this stuff are high dimensional, and a lot of our theory relies on the assumption that n is large. But this analogy here can explain why there are some like neural network theory literature that studies over-parameterized models. They're like a lot more neurons than input dimension, and this is maybe also explains why like very large neural networks work very well. Yeah. So yeah, so the kind of statistical mechanics solution to this problem is, so well, maybe a brief introduction to statistical physics, which is really not that really intuitive in the sense we're kind of interested in like macroscopic behavior. Like there are a lot of gas molecules, probably up to like 10 to the 20s molecules flowing in this room, but we're more interested like in certain macroscopic variables like volume, temperature, and in pressure, for example. And the kind of analogy here is the volume is the volume of solutions. So to solve this problem, we can abstractly think of each of these solutions, like hyperplane here, as kind of a molecule. I mean, maybe this is not like a good analogy, but you can think about as these are abstractly defined things, and space of solutions, and well, we kind of you can think of this as the critical capacity I mentioned earlier is when there's no solution at all. So that means the space of solutions should be zero dimensional. So the valid wave vectors, essentially like the hyperplane vectors, should just shrink to zero. And this is kind of volume very interesting. And this volume can be defined in this function, but this is not really hard to understand because if you just read this, it's essentially just integrating all over all these wave vectors and taking this like we're normalizing this to be n dimensional, like have norm n to like avoid repeating, and also this is a step hypothesized step function that essentially measures this this margin, like how we quantify this separability by saying there's always a margin that is positive, and this is captured by the hypothesized function because when this is positive, this will be 1, and this is 0. The entire thing will be 0, and that does not contribute. This particular term will not contribute to the interval. So, yeah, and that's kind of the idea of using statistical mechanics in this scenario. So, I guess it's not expected at first, but it's quite interesting. And there's a trick called rapid trick. It's quite mathematical, I guess. If you're interested, you can look at it. But so this often appears in some random matrix theory, but essentially just a good way to help us compute this high dimensional interval as a log volume. But I'll not go into deep into this. But yeah, if you are interested, you can ask me. I'm still learning this too. Yeah.
Is this just like an SVM or like what's happening?
Oh yeah. So like you can think of the empirical analogy to this idea. This is an SVM, like max margin classifier, and but we're kind of just trying to study the volume of solutions for this SVM in some sense, but we're interested in the manifold case, not point case.
Well, so what does the V like quantity represent? Like let's say we calculate V, what does that tell you about the space?
Yeah, as I said earlier, yeah, I know this is kind of abstract, so I'll explain this again. So we just discussed in previous slide, right? So there's going to be a hyperplane, possible hyperplane separating the manifolds if they are separate, and like we can have one hyperplane, we can have two sub hyperplanes, and we can have a lot of hyperplanes if they're really separate. When the margin is really large, we have a lot of room to maneuver. But when the separability decreases, there will be less number of hyperplanes we can draw, and this is essentially characterizing the volume here is characterizing the solutions. So the hyperplane essentially. So each hyperplane has a solution point.
Is that the quantity of hyperplane? Like is it telling you like if that V is larger, does that mean there's more solution?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's
Is it possible that you have a volume 0 like set of solutions and you have points that are not probably like that are separable but only by a very let's say your dimension of space of solution to get to, but the dimension of the space of valid solutions or like the hyperplane separation points is 1. So you have potential solutions with volume 0. Is that possible? Or
well, the critical point is volume 0. So the transition from volume non-zero to volume 0 is the critical capacity we're going to define. So yeah, so that's essentially what we are calculating right now. So yeah, so this is like a theoretical result, and basically just you're computing this kind of like a Gaussian integral, but I'll not explain this in detail, but you essentially you can, this is the critical point capacity I mentioned about. So essentially this formula captures the critical capacity for this set of points and manifolds we're interested in, and recall that the critical capacity means like the point, the ratio of class and manifolds, and the ratio between class and number of neurons, that the thing is separable at the critical limit. Yeah.
Wait, can you explain that again? Yeah.
Yeah. So sure. So let me just go back to the previous slide, right? Here, like we're increasing the number of manifolds. Like we're just fixing dimension right now. Okay. So we're increasing the number of manifolds. Now at a certain point, number of these are not separable anymore. And this number of points divided by n will be the capacity. Yeah.
That's the dimension.
N is the dimension of the entire space, like the neural space. The neural space is like the how many neurons you record. If you record 100 neurons, that'll be 100 dimensions.
Wait, so like, but I feel like you have more than 100 points, and you can still have like separability and capacity.
Of course, yeah.
But you say like it's number of points divided by n is capacity.
Number of points means like number of manifold. I mean, in this case, so like each manifold corresponds to like you could say a class of things, like a dog or a cat. That'll be like one manifold.
Is it the number of manifolds divided by n that you can fit until it is non-separable, and that's the capacity? Like,
Yeah,
it's up to limit. It's at the limit. Okay.
That's exactly right. So you can think of this more as a per unit limit. So because essentially like for a very large brain, it can capture a lot of stuff. A very small brain captures less stuff. It's a hypothesis, but we're more interested in this ratio, right? So this ratio is more defining like you can think of this why we're interested in the ratio is that like instead of exactly how much. It's because we want to capture kind of how efficient these are, because if you're given like a very large space, these manifolds can just be random and they can still be separated, as the example here. But in the ratio sense, we're more interested in how to efficiency, storage efficiency. And that's really interesting. I explain this, like this is related to like compression stuff. And yeah.
Could you explain the equation like in the with that about capacity? Like you don't have to actually like maybe like in asymptotic behavior, like what does this tell us about the capacity?
Yeah, so yeah, this is a really good question. So because we are solving this like in this slide, we're solving this in like as a statistical physics problem, and as I said, volume here is more like the space of solutions. And in statistical mechanics, there's a fundamental assumption that is every thermodynamic system will go into thermal equilibrium, and this happens like essentially this reaches a certain temperature, and in the high temperature limit we can sort of approximate this pretty well by interval, but in the low temperature sense this is not really approximated well. But the temperature analogy here, so actually it's the number of dimensions neurons we have. So you can think of this as like the more neurons we have, the entire system is more, that has more variability, and temperature is kind of capturing this because it is like related to entropy, but this is the idea. So we are interested in. So in the high temperature limits, which is a lot of neurons and a lot of manifolds, and this is kind of thing we're interested in. And this formula kind of holds in that sense, in a asymptotic limit of that, like large than minimum.
And then what is when you say you're modeling this in statistical mechanics, are you saying like you're like is it like probabilistically then? Like you're like defining sort of like free energy function, or is it
not exactly. So we're more this is like not physics, I mean in the actual sense, right? This is still a mathematical problem. it's more like we're using this technique from mathematical physics, and that is used a lot in statistical mechanics, and we're using this trick to solve this problem. And so I guess that is a good answer, but also there's ongoing work actually. I'm also kind of little involved in, that is because this reflex trick and the StatMax theory is not mathematically rigorous, and we're actually working on some like actual proof to make this rigorous. And but this is kind of, but with that proof is still going to be like in some asymptotic limit.
What is the angle brackets on the block?
Oh, it's taking like the average over like the so this is not a good notation because so I mean you can think of this as taking the like we're varying this manifold in a lot of sense. So because I didn't prepare to go into that deep, but if you're interested, I can talk to you very later. But there's essentially you can think of this kind of like an expectation, but it's averaging over a different kind of orientation we have. So there are a lot of like vector, I mean hyperplanes, right? So there's going to be some kind of randomness in this, and how we are going to kind of define this randomness is going to be captured in this. Yeah, I'll explain this if you're interested. Yeah, so that's essentially all the math part. And so let's actually, we're as scientists, we're more interested in, we're not just mathematics, right? So we're more interested in interpreting these results. So so what exactly does capacity actually can be interpreted as? So there's really a lot of interpretations, and the most direct interpretation is what we have. How many neural manifolds can you pack into the neural space while they're still linearly decoded? So essentially this means you are feeding neural classifier within the stuff yourself, like this is happening in your brain. So this is an indicator. And the memory, second is memory readout capacity. So well, this is also similar to this, right? So if this manifolds in your brain are not linearly separable, then you're probably not going to distinguish them because there are no hyperplane that can separate them. And the hyperplane normally in a something in the brain is like it's just encoded by some neurons too. So like we do in the final layer in network. So this is kind of like how many memory you can have too. And also this is telling us per neuron information. So this is exactly how we define capacity. Like number of different classes we can pack in per neuron. So these are three important interpretations. So let's get into and this is this theoretical result can be simplified by extracting several variables, and this is I will explain what is it. So the margin is we were studying this max margin classifier, so there's going to be a margin, but essentially the critical capacity happens when margin is 0. So but the things that are capturing the manifolds properties are the what we call geometry are the radius and dimension. So these radius dimensions are not actually the same you imagine about like in the intuitive way, because these manifolds are really random. Like you recall, we didn't do any manipulation before fitting this into our model. So these are very, very random, but these are actually like derived from in the theory. Like in this previous equation here, we essentially extract certain like variables and call them radius and dimensions because they're essentially capturing this in some sense. So this manifold with radius and dimension can be think of as like the radius, effective radius and dimension when you are doing the max margin classification.
Is it of the volume that the solutions exist in, or is it of like are each of those a list of each of the manifolds, or?
Oh no, that's the solution is more like when we're solving the problem. This is not related to that solution space anymore. this is still in the neural space.
Is it just one manifold? Because there's many manifolds, no? And there's many dimension. I'm confused what you mean by radius. Is it like, because there's a bunch of manifolds in
Yeah.
the picture, right?
So this is the average thing. So because we are solving this problem as a system, so what we derive here is kind of the average volume at this particular time or particular state in learning or some sense. What is the average geometry in this in the state space of this manifold? And this is not an intuitive manifold you can think about directly measuring. It's kind of the same you derive from this computational task.
If I had like two manifolds which were like one dimensional.
Yeah.
And one of the manifolds is like 10 dimensional. And what is going into this function? What is the manifold? I'm
No.
trying to separate these.
Yeah, so that is exactly like what I said. Like your input dimension, like you can give them synthetic data like exactly 10-dimensional things, like 10-dimensional spheres. But these are not going to affect this. I mean, it's going to be maybe reflected, and that's our hypothesis, right? But this is not related to anything input. I mean, this is not directly, you're not directly feeding your input space dimensions into this function. But this is something that we derive from this equation. Like when we just directly define this quantities as a radius and function. Okay. Sorry.
Linearly decodable from that first.
Yeah.
That actually decoded by algorithm distribution is that.
I mean, well, decodable is just the same as servable. Would like if you have this possible hyperplane here, we say it is decodable in the sense that there's a possibility there's a hyperplane, but yeah, right now we're not really. This is not related to how much time we need to find this hyperplane. Is that your question?
I think it literally by like it's just a line. And I think that's space, right?
Yeah.
So like, I mean, in 2D a line, linearly acceptable would be a line, but then the higher space, like a plane would be classified as linearly acceptable. It's like a bigger sense there. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so yeah, I think this diagram is going to be more intuitive because this essentially captures the properties of the manifolds we derived. So on the high level and macroscopic level, we have this manifold capacity we derive. And this is how many object categories can be represented in neural activities, as we discussed. And you can think of as in higher capacity sense, in lower capacity sense, these are not really well packed in this state space. So there are less number of object categories you can pack in, so they're kind of more tangled. But when they are untangled, there will be more stuff you can pack. So this is the why the term capacity actually really comes from. Yeah. So in the middle level, mesoscopic level, we have these geometric measures we derive from the equation. So we have the manifold's dimension and radius, and these are related to capacity. And the relation is when there's increase in this, when there's increase in dimension and radius, and this entire space is more tangled. And this aligns with our equation, right? And when there's less dimension and radius, it's more less than tangled. So you can pack more stuff into it. And there are also different other geometric measures that are correlations between these manifolds. That you can think of that also mattering because you're thinking about a lot of manifolds, and like for example, when there's more central correlation, like when these manifolds are their locations are correlated to each other, it's also harder to pack more of them in together. But when there are more access correlation, in a sense they're more aligned to each other, you can pack more stuff, and that's quite intuitive, I guess.
on like the biological or like neuron side, like, do you have to test like the range that the neuron can like activate in? Cause like, I feel like you could just have a manifold like that's this big, but then out of nowhere, another manifold's like out of that range and then like the radiuses need to be like
Yeah,
with respect to like how big they could be.
yeah,
this big.
that's a good question because yeah, as you can see, like there can be a lot of noise in the neural space, especially in the biological sense, and there can be great outliers around and like around this stuff, right? And the kind of the powerful point about this series, we're kind of averaging out this stuff in the series, and when we are considering the capacity, the radius is computed is kind of like you're thinking of this entire manifold like rotating like around this hyperdeducing subroutine, and this eventually this is going to be averaged out, and so this dimension is not really related to the input stuff, but it's kind of the actual computational properties that can be derived. Yeah. So any question on this side? Okay, so that's essentially about the theory, and let's have a summary of this. So we have this theory of neural manifolds as multi-level proof of neural population. We have either feature vectors or neural population data, and we fit this into this zero-back geometric analysis, and we obtain this connection between task level manifold capacity and representational level manifold dimension, radius, and correlation. Yeah, so we have found this correlation, and I hope this answers some of your questions at the beginning. So how these manifolds are affecting the computational performance. Yeah. So there are some great implications for neuroscience data analysis. One thing I mentioned earlier, there's no need to throw away any data, and we can overcome the limitation of traditional dimensionality reduction methods because we're considering everything and not wasting information. And the second part is we have this multi-level measure that links task representation, and this is really related to a lot of like applications that you see later earlier, like in neuroscience.
Number one, how does it not throw away any data? Because I thought the point was you're trying to pick like a few neurons as opposed to all of them, right? And if you choose all of them, then it's just like.
What do you mean by choosing few neurons?
So let's say that you have 100 neurons total you could graph for your like subspace or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Like the point is you want to have like the greatest capacity, right? Like 100 maybe is easy, like always working, right? But its capacity is low because it's 100, right? So you can maybe get down to 50 and have a greater capacity. But are you throwing away the other 50 neurons then? So you're are doing a dimensionality reduction?
No, we're not. We're not changing the inputs in any sense. We're just feeding this into the theory. And I guess is there a question about? I mean, there can be dimensional reduction happening in the algorithm, right? But that's actually something we're going to capture. But we're not really throwing away any of this data at first. We're still just directly feeding the feature vectors into the theory. So,
like, are you still like pruning or getting rid of neurons that aren't needed?
no.
Or no, you're keeping all the
Yeah,
like give you 100 neurons, you keep it 100 dimensional space to and try to
Yeah.
reduce it down to a simpler one so it hits zero capacity or yeah.
Oh, yeah, like the entire process of this is happening in well, you can think of happening in the derivation of the program. It's not actually happening in the real space. We are not doing it, but the theory captures this process of finding the capacity. So where the theory is just using the raw data. Yeah.
What goes on into like geometric analysis? Like, let's suppose I have some data set, right? Then how do you estimate like the manifolds from this? Is that like how would you know what dimensionality of the manifold is even looking for?
Yeah, this is a really confusing part. I also encountered this problem when I first saw this. So the dimension and radius here, and any geometric measures I mentioned here, it's not it's not exactly defined as the thing you see in the input space. So there's neural computation is very chaotic, and it does not really have a lot of good properties to have, right? So it's not something look like very smooth thing with like these things, but it's like a random like points, and it can look very weird, and depending on like scenario you're talking about. So there's no way to define dimension and radius here really very well. And what we're doing here is by connecting this population with the computational task, and we derive this theory, and in the theoretical formula, we extract certain parts on this formula, and we call them radius and dimension. And why we call them is because they're related to how we count the wall. It's really actually hard to explain like not diving into this theory deep enough, but you can think about these measures are not the exact measures, but more or less the effective measures that affects the computation process. Yeah.
So you're never actually doing a calculation or you try to approximate like the data points manifolds. You're bypassing this kind of, is that accurate?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Like are you actually ever fitting the data points to a manifold like you do in like I don't know, like an app or something? So does your theory just depend on the rate? Your theory said it depends on the radius and the dimension. I guess I'm kind of confused with what you still mean by the dimension.
Yeah.
Given some data points in an ambient space, like what do you mean by the dimension of those data points?
Yeah, so in the theoretical sense, it's defined like because we have to, like in the theoretical sense we have to define some kind of assumption before we can work in, right? So in the actual theoretical work, we think of this manifold living in a finite subspace, and that subspace is well, this is the kind of the theoretical assumption, but it's not necessarily true. But the entire manifold live in this finite subspace, and it's defined by like a cylinder and some axes, and you can approximate it as an ellipsoid, which is in model case. But in the actual data analysis sense, there's also like direct numerical formulas here.
So you're calculating the dimension is the dimension of that subspace.
You can think of they are linked, but they're not exactly the dimension of that subspace. It's more this dimension is more related to the convex hull of this manifold. So and some statistics revolving around. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, if you have more questions about theory, I'm happy to discuss. Yeah, and implication for neuroscience theory, we have a mechanistic interpretation of task implementation at a population level, and also there's some kind of universality happening here, where we seem to have some candidate for the universal factor that drives cognition. So I'll now go into application. So we'll see some cool results actually seeing why I'm talking about. And I hope you're not still tired right now. Yeah. Yeah. And okay. So part 2. So what we have previously is the zero-based geometric analysis, and we have the task level efficiency, representation level efficiency, and the single neural level structure. So today I'm mostly going to talk about this part A here, which is how brain regions and learning is going to shape the manifolds, and also part C, manifolds as a design principle for some neural-inspired neural network models. Yeah. Yeah. So let's go into part A. So this diagram is essentially like approximation of what the visual stream in our brain approximately look like. So we have the pixel layer at the retina layer, and into some intermediate layer, and into some final hidden layer in the IT cortex. And there are some analogy in this biological sense, but I'm going to show later what this happens. But this is essentially the approximation intuition we already have. The manifolds are shrinking in this process and eventually yielding better object recognition. So there are a lot of works in this lab, and they have done a lot of analysis on interpreting ANNs, and there are like vision, language, audition, and well, different type of stuff. But I'm going to focus on vision today due to time limit. So yeah, I'm going to focus on two stuff here. One is artificial and one is biological. So first one is vision, and so we're trying to characterize these visual deep neural networks as a model system for our study, and the object class in this sense are, well, I guess you guys probably are familiar with this. So we just take classes from ImageNet and we generate this kind of different stimulus variation manifolds and provide this into AlexNet, which is like a standard. Well, I mean, it's not a standard today, but probably like one of the good model systems to study first about vision, and it also has a really good matching score between to the visual cortex in the neuroscience community. Yeah, so let's study this first. So first, we have one of the first tests this really actually works. So there's have a theoretical prediction of manifold capacity and an empirical result of manifold capacity, and using it, you can see this matches pretty well. And now we can follow these key parameters we have derived, namely capacity, dimension, radius, and correlation, and see how they move across each layer. So we can say, like in the input layer, which is the pixel layer, capacity is really low because you can think of it because we're the image space, like dimension is really high and so it's not really easy to separate them. But as this network processes the data, you can see the capacity increases, and it is driven by the decrease in dimension, radius, and correlation in these manifolds. So we can see like over these convolutional layers and max square layers, I guess. So this is I think it's pretty cool result we have here. So we can actually see what is driving them in this black box to help us better associate this. So I mean, higher capacity essentially means like the model is better at recognizing stuff, right? So we can certainly decipher into this black box and see what is driving this effect. Any question on this side?
What is the capacity? I have a good intuition for, but the radius and dimension, I'm still a little. What's intuition for that?
I know. I know it's a bit confusing, but right now maybe intuitively you can just understand us as the geometric intuition here. So like
are these the average radiuses?
Yeah, we can simulate the opposites. But this if you think about these manifolds, which are not exactly, but if you think of them as just spheres, these are really nice to understand, right?
Yeah. What about the dimension? But I think the radius I get, it's radius is smaller.
Dimension is really simple. Like you have a plane, you have a circle, right? You have a straight dimension, you increase dimension by 1, you have a sphere. And this can be generalized into 4 dimensions for a time.
What is it? So like I'm imagining like spheres in a 3D space, right? Like something that separates them. Spheres are smaller. You can pack more spheres in, and that increases capacity. But then what is the dimension in that?
Of course, like if you have spheres, each take of the volume is pretty large, right? If you take only a circle like this, it's going to take less space, right? You can pack more stuff.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
Is it saying like there are variants in each dimension then? Or
it's more like the intrinsic dimension of this manifold. like they're living in a subspace, and the ambient space is still two-dimensional. And
So is it like computed kind of by like the sphere, so pancake
Yeah.
analogy, like is it the ratio like between like if one of the like dimensions is really small, then that means that like it's like
Yeah,
lower dimensional.
exactly. That's the kind of like the kind of compression happening here, right? So we don't know why, because it's not programmed to do this. It's just, we're just doing back propagation. Yeah. But somehow like in machine we see this, and as we see it, going to see later, in biology brain, they also see this. Right. Okay.
Didn't this relate to like neural collapse?
You mean the internal collapse?
It's like
In
when
the
you have,
training learning?
yeah, if you just have a classifier, then in the last couple layers, you see like the anything from a specific class will collapse on its beam.
I mean, capacity looks very like as well.
Yeah, but the thing is, all of them are like the capacity is studied as like a per neuron thing.
Okay.
It's not affected by like how many neurons you have in each layer. Right? It's a per neuron thing, so it's invariant. Yeah. Right.
But the distance between neurons, not like physical space, it's more about like relevance distance.
Yes, it's not physical, not in our actual brain, it's in this neural space.
So in the volume, you're gonna have multiple like clusters.
Yes.
There's something called like a small worldness next that measures the interconnectedness of them. But not like a very homogeneous capacity.
That's quite interesting. I didn't follow this, but yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, this whole idea is there can be a lot of room to improve this field probably, and there is improvement right now. But unfortunately, I'm not going to cover everything. But this is already showcasing a really cool direction here. Yeah, we'll probably there are a lot of like room for improvement and like I mean downsides in this room. But yeah, I'll go to that later. And also a very interesting thing and we have studied is to study actually like right now we can use this to study these common neural circuits and how they are like doing the computation. So you can say one of these pretty popular activation function, the ReLU function. So which is loosely also inspired from neural networks because you can see this kind of spike going forward. And you can see this narrow here on the x and y axis is the kind of the delta of the change of correlation and dimension of mirrors we described earlier. So you can see before and after the rule activation, there's a change in the effective dimension and correlation. And is there we are more because as we discussed earlier, right? So less correlation and less dimension, it will be better. So the green part here is going to be kind of a better thing how to get. But interestingly, we see like ReLU actually like improves the correlation, but it does not really improve the dimension. So there's a kind of trade-off happening here. So, but instead, like you can see like in the microcircuit here, I mean, yeah. So like the max pooling layer here, there's not really a big change, but it's more like yeah, there's another trade-off. So like dimension is decreasing here, but the correlation is increasing here. So this is improving. Mass pooling is improving dimension, and activation is improving correlation. So that's why kind of this like microcircuit, like convolution, ReLU, and pooling, kind of improve both. So yeah, it's going to be in the third part. Yeah.
What was correlation again? What is it? Is it like intuitively do?
Yeah, correlation is really like the in the most random sense, these manifolds are just randomly located, right? But without correlation, these manifolds can be like closer together or like there are some kind of correlation between them, like they're no longer completely random. But well, maybe a good example is like when you're like when students are going to school like on the street, like in the most random sense, they just walk like everyone is approximately equal to each other distance. But like in the correlated sense, people will be like chatting with each other like and will be closer together.
There's some like symmetry, like with more symmetry with the manifold, mean more correlation or less? Is it like a
It's more like
symmetry?
not with single manifold, but with a lot of different manifolds.
Yeah, there's like many manifolds that have some kind of like symmetric, like.
Oh, yeah, you're trying to
Is that,
say that.
is that like a correlation then in the?
Well, yeah, definitely.
Okay, and then that, what does that mean for us then? Like, if there's a higher correlation, what does that do? They
Yeah,
like,
usually the higher correlation will degrade capacity because when you think about this, when they are very correlated, there are less maneuverability for the hyperplane to separate them.
they're like wasting space.
Yes,
You
that's
could
right.
just store it in one of them
Yeah.
instead of doing two, okay.
That's right. So correlation is like inversely proportional to capacity. So this is, I think, really cool. So you can see how these individual layers are affecting doing the computation. Yeah, and yeah, we can see this in some ways. There's a trade-off like between like Rayleigh and Maxwell, and so that's why like a kind of like a microcircuit will work in general. And now we have some biological data. So biological data are harder to extract, so we only have three layers. So which is the pixel layer and retina and V4, which is a important visual cortex in the pathway we see, and IT cortex, which is kind of the you can think of as the memory stuff. Oh, and that is happening, that is storing and like storing more about semantic information instead of doing processing. So
The actual brain, or is this like that computer?
Yeah.
Neural network, or is this our brain?
monkey,
Neural
like
network?
monkey.
Monkey, okay.
But this data is from the Carlos labs. Yeah. And these papers are all published, so I'm just yeah.
As far as the manifolds go for these different objects, if you are the manifolds continuous necessarily?
No. Yeah, that's the manifold is not a mathematical smooth manifold.
So how was all of this measured? Like, what do they use with monkey?
Oh yeah. So they use electrophysiology, which is taking electrode into monkey brains, a lot of electrodes and record them
Oh,
and
is that why they didn't use a human?
record potential change of it. There are human experiments, but you cannot insert too many electrodes. Mostly those are patients. You insert some like electrodes to help them detect like seizures or something. So yeah, so it's not easy to do human experiments. So, and even from monkey experiment, you can see we don't have a lot of data. We only have three data, but in this three data, we can already see this trend happening. So a similar trend as in neural networks. Like,
How do they, do they know that each of the layers corresponds to high level features? Like, how do they know it's like the sequential order, like our, like, yeah, like machine learning?
yeah, we don't know. Like, this is just our assumption, and we should extract them. And, of course, there's some inspiration from biological research previously, like we kind of see this circuit that is originating from the retina to the V4 to the IT cortex, but how their computation is done is not really established.
Because I feel like there's a slight difference between like machine learning architecture and brain architecture that, like the sequential running of the like processing, which is a graph neural net kind of processing, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, but does it like I'm just wondering, do you know like how much does this theory of like just having a sequential network kind of hold in the biological? Because I feel like it wouldn't as much.
Yeah, the brain is probably implemented very differently from and but the thing is this whole series is about universality. So we're not even we know implementation, like even in neural networks, we know the exact step of each implementation, but we don't really know why. We just put them there and it works sometimes. And how they arise, how these features arise during training, just doing back propagation, creating the scene, how they arise to this interesting combination of properties we have is unknown, right? And this is similarly unknown for brain. And it is very probably that brain incorporates some kind of like, well, some kind of similar architecture, but probably very different. But the idea is on the computational sense, they're doing the same computational task in this sense. So this is the universal property.
So how were these capacities measured again? Like how are these values measured again?
These are computed from the raw data. So these
Okay.
are computed from the series.
I see, okay.
Yeah, and also the object manifolds here are like different classes, and they constructed this kind of stuff for monkeys to look. Yeah.
So we just like hide the monkey down and
Yeah.
at 3 points.
I don't know.
Of their thing, just like show them in pictures.
There's
It's like, what's the neural?
Probably, yeah, maybe they give some food or something.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, there are a lot of experimental lab doing this. But we're more like a serial lab, so I'm not familiar with this. So yeah, and there's also like comparison between this monkey cortex with the neural network. You can see there have a lot of neural networks, and also these two lines are V4 and 90 cortex. And again, I mean, since because there are very few data points we have in monkey, so there's maybe not very convincing trend, but you can still see this interesting trend happening here, right? I mean, there's some compression happening there, and but anyway, yeah.
Is this kind of then a little bit of a theory, like your I feel like this is like a way of just interpreting what's happening in the like neurons and stuff. So like if this was more, let's say this is like you agree with this trend, say it's higher fidelity or something, you could use this to maybe back the fact that it is maybe sequentially processing because it's building higher level like features and
Yeah.
it's increasing capacity.
Yeah, that's probably, yeah. Yeah, at least in this visual sense, yeah. Also, I think there are also papers that study language models, and speech models, etc. And there can be similar stuff.
I'm wondering if like if there's a part of the brain that is like recurrent and if you keep measuring its capacity, it would like increase over time or something. Like that would be interesting as well.
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of directions, and especially like right now, as you can see, these capacities and mirrors are fixed in time, and we're really just reading the model at this moment and seeing or checking their properties. But there's some ongoing work that is studying like the learning dynamics of these variables, and that'll be pretty interesting because, as I said, we don't know how brilliant this includes all this stuff, and there's some theoretical work we are trying to do is to connect brilliant design with capacity, and those work are actually pretty hard because for gradient descent in general, like it's even hard to do one-step analysis, and but like in general in neural network theory or machine learning theory, there's a lot of big math behind this, but it's more like complicated, and so I guess you're interested, you can talk about this later, yeah. So yeah, finally, I'll talk about this like a quite recent paper, and they're using this manifold capacity as an objective for designing neural network models. So because we know there, like self-supervised learning, right? So there are no labels. So in some sense, manifold capacity doesn't really depend on what classes there are. There are only classes in it. So what about like we're just trying to maximize the capacity and train the network like based on this objective instead, and they did this and found it's pretty well, and we can learn like state of our models using this method, and Yeah, but I'm not very familiar with this project, but very interested in their paper links. Yeah, and finally some summary. Okay, so manifold capacity and motivation for this is people and like intelligent beings we perform environment object recognition and this gives rise to perceptual manifolds. And the method we use is manifold capacity, and it's a generalization of the perceptual capacity and using results from statistical physics and theoretical machine learning. Oh, and also by the way, the entire replica thing I talked about how we compute this high dimensional interval, it's actually related to some theory called spin glass, and this whole thing is seemingly very unrelated. And what is spin glass is essentially like, well, we have like there's back in last century some people study like how these like materials like glass and how this transform under like heat processing. Like when they're making the glass, there's some transition happening from like liquid glass to solid glass, and they're studying these properties and turns out these properties are related to the statistics of the like the quantum spin of these particles and actually this theory mathematically transfer to this theory. So yeah, it's quite interesting. So yeah, so and intuition here, yeah. So as I said, like lower dimensional manifold gives better capacity because these are more packable than both. And smaller radius gives you smaller clusters, so more packable than large clusters. And higher unmanned dimension means bigger box to pack. Lower correlation gives distributed manifolds evenly to pack more. And higher correlation implies stacking like less to pack more, right? So like when there's correlation like correlation in alignment, and it's different from correlation in similar line. So in alignment is more like when they're like distributed like this, it's more easy to packing together. It's not like this. So yeah. Any question on this side? Okay. So as a final summary, so manifold capacity theory as a population coding theory. So it formally connects multiple levels of abstractions and scales and properties of neural manifolds at population level will predict the manifold capacity at task level. So there's a connection happening. And so and also this connection is formal, not just based on some conventional reduction techniques. And also conceptually, this captures the aspects of efficient coding principle. So like we're compressing these intelligent systems are compressing the manifolds. So well, I guess this might be also related to some current idea institutions about like large language models, and they're sort of serving as compression machines, compress human knowledge. So yeah, so compression might be this might be for the compression of them for intelligence, and also like this is universally applicable to a wide range of data sets, modalities, and species. As you already can see, we apply this to biology and machine learning, and we can collect from electrophysiology, causal imaging, fMRI, also different sensory areas, cortex, and cognitive areas. Yeah, so there are a lot of interesting stuff happening here. Yeah. Yeah, and final acknowledgement, I really want to thank my professor and mentor who is advising me. And you can see more about this slides, and it's really adapted from this presentation. Yeah. Yeah, and finally, as you can already see, this subject is really interdisciplinary, and I hope you are more interested in this subject, or at least get familiar with this now. So, and you can see we're combining like techniques from optimization, machine learning, statistical physics, and high dimensional geometry. this can get together, give rise to new series for us to understand, well, one of the like biggest mysteries, which is ourselves. Yes, thank you. And if you have any questions, you can just ask my email. Yeah.
So what is your research right now?
Oh, so my research is as I said earlier, like the capacity right now is more like studying the freeze model and where we're just kind of doing analysis on each stage of the model, right? But how this is related to actual learning process, for example, in a standard within the same setup, and we're kind of, but we're seeing like this kind of geometrical observables like radius and dimension, and we hope to see some more observables during learning. Like one thing might be like the derivative of capacity with respect to the dimension and radius, and this might like shed light on even like finer species of how learning is affecting the computation.
Have you seen rocking?
Hmm?
It's a OpenAI Google paper, and it's like transformers and stuff, or like small models where they like tend to memorize at first, but then suddenly they form like a circuit to like learn actually how to do it, and then they become better like suddenly. And I'm wondering if you measured that with capacity or something like that. Because it's a weird phenomenon that happens where they like don't learn for a while and then they like suddenly do learn. I'm wondering if that has to do with like.
Yeah, this is really interesting topic, like the idea about like emergence and like sudden transition in performance. And I guess this is why actually statistical physics really plays a role here. Like it's not random, because in statistical physics, we have observed phenomena like phase transition, like from gas to liquid to solid. There's an abstract transition happening. And we think there's probably something happening. And actually, we already observed something like in learning, like for different learning rates, like if you set learning rate as a parameter, and there is some phase transition happening in this capacity. So,
That's crazy.
but that's still ongoing work. So I hope I can present this in the fall. Yeah, this is.
What was the universal factor that drives computation?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not really answer, and we cannot really overstate anything. But at least in this current experimental data and results, we can see like compression and can be something important, I guess.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. One last thing, of course, as usual, right before we go. Yeah, symposium is on Monday. That's the thing that's happening. Anyone's free to join. You just RSVP. We have free food. Basically, this is a little thing that we have in collaboration with ACM Cyber. This is our third quarter doing this now, where we basically is a little event where we just showcase everything we have been doing for this quarter. And you know, it's free to attend. You know, and if you RSVP, you can get food as well. So that's pretty fun. There's that, and of course, you know, looking back, we did a lot, you know, this quarter. It was, you know, we did LLMs, we did general video models, we did mechanistic interoperability, we brought our team back to do more nerfs. And then, of course, Kevin today was talking about neuralAI. And looking in the future, I may be doing another diffusion thing that's like, I swear, different than the one I did last time. Julie may be joining us to talk about the intersection of networking and ML and how you can use ML to analyze networking logs and, you know, to improve a lot of networking stuff. And very likely what's going to happen is Sarah Hooker, who is the VP of research at Cohere, one of the sort of rising, you know, LLM and natural language processing companies and research companies, will very likely do a talk / reading group events next quarter as well. So that will be very exciting. It will be really nice. And we also have a lot more to come. So once again, thanks for coming to reading group this quarter, and I'll see you guys next quarter.